over 100,000 canisters so far this year. What does that even mean? So actually, allegedly, it was stated how not too long ago, according to a post by the Internet Computer Today, which referenced the Internet Computer dashboard, it showcased how there has been around 150,000 canisters that have been registered this year when it comes to the Internet Computer. Now, why is this even relevant? I'll explain in today's video, even though nothing I say is financial advice and I'm not telling anyone to do anything, and this is just my personal opinion and perspective. But the reason why this could matter is because if we take a look at canisters in this case, it's kind of like their version of a smart contract. Let me explain what I mean by this. So basically, if we take a look at it again, because canisters are kind of the Internet Computer's version of smart contracts, but much more powerful in a sense where, it just has a lot more of these amazing features, at least in my perspective. However, besides that point, we have to consider the fact that there's that many that have been registered this year. Again, when it comes to canisters, it could indicate a couple things, and I've actually noted them down just so I don't forget, right? So basically, this metric, in my opinion, could be considered pretty impressive because it kind of arguably could showcase developer adoption, or should I say real developer adoption, and also building activity. Because for that many canisters to be registered in just this year alone, and that's so far, right? We're not even like near the end of this year. No, we're still halfway through it. And yet there's been around 150,000 canisters registered this year. So we have to consider that. So I think if anything, it's a clear indication that maybe this showcases developer adoption and as well as building activity. That's the thing. However, not to mention, I think this could also showcase increased network usage. And again, there seems to be quite a lot of activity that's going on as of right now when it comes to the Internet Computer. So again, I think that's a reasonable hypothesis for me. Not to mention, I think it kind of showcases ecosystem expansion, maybe, because we have to consider each new canister hypothetically could represent a new app or a new service or infrastructure that's being added to the network. And what does this do? It builds more of a use case, right? In which case, in theory, could result in more users and developers finding a reason to even care about the Internet Computer to begin with, right? Because if there's more use cases when it comes to the Internet Computer, that inherently is going to be a net positive for it, because the reputation is going to become that, hey, you know what? This is a place known for use cases, which again, like I mentioned before, could maybe allow for better exposure, more people to care about it, and more developers to pay attention. So overall, I think this is pretty impressive. And in my last Internet Computer video, I even talked about a monumental achievement in the case of Caffeine AI now being live on Amazon Web Services in terms of the marketplace, or should I say the Amazon Web Services marketplace, right? I even made a video talking about just how impressive that is. And then now I see something like over 100,000 canisters registered this year on the Internet Computer. Like, what is going on, Now, again, we do know what's going on. Like I mentioned before, Caffeine AI being live on the Amazon Web Services marketplace, seeing over 100,000 canisters registered this year. That's what's going on. But at the same time, I'm just saying that kind of in a more sarcastic way, in a sense where, seriously? The Internet Computer is around $2. This is not at around $5 or even $10, which keep in mind, $10 isn't even considered that good anyways when it comes to this, right? Last year, if someone said, oh, the Internet Computer is hovering at around $10 or whatever, people would think it's a little bit bearish. But just because we're around 5 times lower than $10, and yet we're still seeing off this, if let's say they keep up this pace for whatever reason, because halfway through 2026, there's around 150,000 canisters registered so far, right? But if this continues on, that means if we times that by 2, we're on pace to see around 300,000 canisters registered in just 2026 alone. We're on pace to see that. It doesn't mean it will happen. Who knows? It could stagnate. But if it were to follow the same pace, we could very well see that. And we're seeing that right now, right? Again, that many canisters registered at a time when the market isn't even doing the best. So what would that figure look like if, let's say, the market really were to take off? If it's maybe a couple times more than what I'm seeing as of right now in terms of the canisters registered, wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. That's the thing. Because even with unfavorable market conditions, we're seeing that much activity already. So again, I think sometimes people don't really consider this. They only take a look at the price and they're like, oh, it's around $2 and all this. Yeah, I mean, I get it. But at the same time as well, the fundamentals, they tell an entirely different story, in my opinion. It kind of showcases something that is not reminiscent of the price charts, because if I only take a look at the price charts, it's so easy for me to just be like, wow, this project is doing really bad and all this. But, if I take a look at it a little bit deeper, if I take a look at it behind the scenes, so to speak, if I just kind of analyze the fundamentals and what's going on, it's just a completely different thing. Because keep in mind, so far in this year, in just 2026, around 400,000 of the supply has been burned. So it's been removed. So let's just imagine that. That's really good, in my opinion, in terms of mitigating that hypothetical inflation. So far, though, I've seen like in total around 2 million of the supply be burned, like in terms of being removed like that. Now, people like to say, well, like, why does that really matter? Well, it's because, keep in mind, they just recently did something called Mission 70, which is a strategic plan to cut ICP inflation by up to 70% by the end of this year. And if we take a look at, let's say, in the case of 400,000 of the supply so far this year has been burned, and we consider how in total around 2 million has been burned, right? So in just 2026 alone, like not even throughout the whole year, just for half of 2026, the amount that was burned represents 20% of what has been burned approximately in regard to its all-time. What do I mean by that? Let me just rephrase it in a better way, right? So around 2 million of the supply has been burned so far, but 400,000 has been burned just throughout this year so far. So that means just halfway through 2026, 20% of the entire burned supply has went down in 2026 so far. That's the thing. So the amount that is being burned as of right now, if we just continue this pace, it could very well be close to 1 million by the end of this year, right? In terms of the supply that's being burned. So when people like to say, oh, Mission 70 didn't really do anything, well, it's actually doing something, in my opinion. And the fact that there's this much, reduction, or this much of a reduction, I should say, in the supply of just the American computer, when it comes to 2026 only, wow. It's pretty surprising that all of this has been going on, and yet the price isn't doing the best. Like, arguably, in my opinion, I think it's way better than when it was at almost $19 back in 2024. The reason why I say that is because I didn't see all this back then in 2024. It just wasn't a reality back then. And the fact that I'm seeing all of this as of right now, like in 2026, with the internet computer being at around $2 and being so close to its all-time low, keep in mind, its all-time low literally is $1.98. We're just slightly above $2. We're so close to its all-time low, and yet we're seeing all of this. I think it's a clear indication that Dfinity treats this seriously. Also, on top of that, I think it's a clear indication that the internet computer actually arguably has a pretty decent use case. Because or not, why would there be that many canisters registered this year on the internet computer? Right? In the case of over 100,000, and to be a little bit more specific, around 150,000. Again, when people like to say, oh, this is not better than 2024, or should I say this is not as good as back when it was at its peak in 2024, I disagree with that. I think arguably as of right now, it's way better than back then, because I just didn't see all of this last year or even the year before. But I'm seeing it now though. So, I'm still waiting. But if something became better, yet it became cheaper, I'm not going to complain, because I'm looking to hypothetically dollar cost average. But I'm not telling anyone to do anything. However, this is just my personal opinion and thoughts as of right now. But I just want to say thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all have a very amazing day.